Yo, what's up, guys? It's Nathan here. Today I want to show you how I put together kicks, how I kind of synthesize a kick, and then how I layer them together. I remember when I first started that I thought I had to learn how to make kicks, and I spent something like 3 months doing it, or 6 months, or way too long. I overcomplicated things, and then at one point it just dawned on me that getting the kick you want should be a very simple process. And I'm going to show you that at its most complex level, a kick that you've made can be divided into two parts. So for the first part of this tutorial, I'm just going to show you how I synthesize a kick, and then how I would layer what I call a top kick over top of it to give it more character, to kind of give it more of a nice attack. So to start things off, I'm pulling up my favorite kick synth, which is Bassism. A lot of people like to use, I think it's called Kickmaker or just Kick. I can't remember who makes it. But they're both great kick synths to use. Whichever one you feel more comfortable should be the one that you use. In this case, this is the one I'm most comfortable with. So whenever I want to make a kick, the first thing I decide is whether I need a subby kick or a punchy kick. Now, the reason I make that distinction is because a subby kick means that you typically have no sub bass in your mix, and so the kick is going to be occupying your sub frequencies. A punchy kick is a kick where there's not really any sub in it. It's a short tail kick. It comes in quick and then goes away quick, and you typically high pass it so it has that punchy quality. So to start things off, we're going to start by showing you a long tail kick, and then we'll show you how we make a punchy kick. So we've got Bassism here. We're going to loop this at 120 BPM just because I like working a little bit slower when making kicks. And we're just going to configure some things here until we get a nice kind of long tail kick. That to me is already perfect, actually. I like to keep it pretty simple when I start making a kick. I don't, overcomplicate things. This just happens to start on a preset that I like. Now, if I want to layer another kick on top of this, whatever kick synth you're using to create your kicks, I would suggest that your kick isn't terribly clicky, so that it, where, on Nicky Romero's kick, you would start your pitch at somewhere around 5K. In this one, that's where I'm doing it. Because if it's too clicky when you put your top kick, which is just some random random kick that you have in your samples, or it could be even a hi-hat you might layer in there, those two things will kind of conflict, and I'll show you right now. As a matter of fact, we're just going to find a kick that we like, and we'll see if we can't layer it on top here. So first things first, when I'm trying to layer a kick on top of my kick, I look for kicks that have really aggressive attacks, because if it's really aggressive, then I can shape it with EQ, I can shape it with compression if I want to go crazy. I can do lots of things to it, whereas if it was weaker like the initial kicks I was looking at, there's not really much I can do there, but I might find later that I might want to layer a third kick in there to give it like body or character, which you can do, because you can go to the sky with this, but we're just going to find just an aggressive one. I think I found it here, and I like that, so I'm going to take that on there. I don't know what it's doing. It's automatically playing. It doesn't usually do that. Oh man, that's annoying. All right, cool. So we've got our kick here, and the first thing I like to do is I like to shorten the volume of the kick over time. I like to control the length of the sample. So we're going to play with it until we get that right. And then the next thing I like to do immediately is, since I'm using this second kick, which we will call our top kick, and then this original synth kick is, well, for the sake of this tutorial, we'll call it our bottom kick, which means it's handling more of our low end. I'm going to turn the starting pitch down a little more so we have something a little more dramatic to work with. And then we're going to high pass our top kick. You are almost always high passing your top kick at least 100. Oftentimes I find I do it around 1K to 400 hertz. So let's listen to it and see what we got. So I like that. I think there's a little bit of like a hi-hat in here. Let's see if I can't reduce it. And then the next thing that I sometimes find I do is I might fool around with the pitch of the layered kick and see if I like the sound. Okay, so it's fine where it is. And let's see if we can't finesse this a little more by going into our original synth kick. I go back to it, and then I'm going to configure the kind of overall punch of it so that this original kind of transient, which I'm actually going to make a little adjustment to. I like to put a transient shaper when I do this on the top kick. And this is just going to make it really just raw and aggressive and thumpy. Really cool. Love this tool for that. And then we go back to our original kick, and we just fool around with this starting pitch until we get a sound we like. So there we go. We've created our own kick, and sometimes I'll just sit around and make a bunch of kicks during the day. I used to do that a lot more, but now I just kind of make them, tailor make my kicks. I often find that when I'm putting a mix together, I just like to have a basic synth kick that I work with, and then as it progresses over time, if I decide it needs a little more character, I'll add this top kick in. And so if we listen to the before and after, what we'll do is we will mute this top kick, and we'll just listen to the kick by itself, and then we'll just hear this as I A/B this. So really all the difference is whether you're deciding, do I want like a very obvious synth sounding kick, or do I want a character kick? That's pretty much the distinction I make. If I'm making like more breathy music, or like I want like a kick that has even more character, what I would do is I would focus on finding a kick that has more of like a breath to it. Kind of like what you'd hear on a natural kick drum set. So we'll see if we can't layer a third kick in here for those of you who think this isn't enough. I need more. I need those kicks that are really hard to make because I have to know I'm better than everyone else and tell my friends, wow, I'm really good at this. So we'll do that for you guys. And we'll find a kick here. Okay, so I found a kick where I like kind of like the tail end breath of it. So I'm gonna kind of try to focus on that and articulate it, which really is a fancy way of saying find it and remove everything else. So I have that breath that I like on it. I'm gonna high pass it so I get rid of the low end. Turn the volume all the way up. And then you get something like this with the two layers. And then I would shorten it. I can control how long it's breathy for. So pretty cool. That's how you make a kick, just like that. It's not complicated. If you have a synth drum maker, you just use a preset, start there, and then finesse it down. Don't overcomplicate things. There's not one magical kick that's going to be all your kicks. Eventually you will find that kick that you use a lot, because there's not really a point to like make a new sample every time you want to make a song. You know, I mean, you want to get to the fun parts, and I don't really know if kick making is like the most fun part. It's definitely fun at first because you're like, yeah, wow, my kicks sound better than everybody else's. But, you know, at the end of the day, a lot of people just use samples, or a lot of people just keep it simple so they can produce full songs instead of, continuous 8-bar loops that nobody will listen to except for you. And then you'll go crazy and you'll be like, why haven't I made a full song? So moving on, I'm going to show you the way I layer just two samples together, which is the same concept. I use the same idea here that I use with these first two samples. I have one sample that operates as my cleaner low-end kick, and then another which operates as my character top end. So let's disable these, and we'll grab two samples in. So can't figure out why that keeps automatically playing. Can't seem to remember that behavior. Anyway, so what we're doing now is we're going to be making a punchy kick. A punchy kick is a kick that has no sub in it. It's a kick that's great for dubstep. It's great for any kind of music where your sub is being handled by a synth or your bass or anything like that. So we picked a punchy kick here. It sounds pretty cool. It's missing some stuff, so we're going to sculpt it and see if we can't get something that's nicer. So the first thing I do with punchy kicks is I control the tail. It's much easier to control the tail of your kick when you can work with it in the sample. Because inside of if you use a sampler to control the envelope of your kick, you can't control the shape of the decay. The decay is a set curve in there, and it may not be the curve that you want. So you have a lot more control when working with a sample. Just if you can work with a sample directly on the timeline, I would recommend that. But everybody has their own approaches that they find are more fluid. And fluidity is definitely something that's very important. So we're going to come back here and configure this. I find that I tend to like a really kind of short, snappy kick because When I go to limit it, you'll find that the tail kind of comes back a little bit. So I shorten the tail a little more than I do, and I'll show you how I limit my kicks, because there's one tool that I use to do that to make it's pretty much like it's like it's like when you're cleaning your house, you use Febreze as like the final part of that ritual to make everything complete. Well, this limiting strategy is like the Febreze for your kick. You're like, wow, this is amazing. I just feel complete. So we're gonna add another top layer here. As a matter of fact, I'm actually gonna add an EQ first to cut out the low end. Cool dubstep kick. And then we're going to add just something punchy on top of it. Need to actually remove some of the air in it. I don't know yet. I'm going to add a layer first. So I'm going to go with this, cut it, just immediately put an EQ on it so it doesn't confuse my low end. Going to add a transient designer. I'll use the other one that I have, which is Oxford Transmod. These are the two that I know of. They're both equally useful. The SPL one is a lot easier to use. This one gives you more control in a different way, though. I don't think about which one I use. I just pull whichever one I'm thinking of at the time I do it. There's not really any reason that I do that. And then, so now that this top layer has more snap on it, our bottom we can remove some of the top end on it to get it to sit better. So cool, I like that. There's something neat going on there. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if the transient portion of these kicks layering together was just completely out of control and would just not be fair to your limiter when you finish your track. So let's check it out on our limiter here. Well, we can't see it there because I'm really good about my gain staging. So what we're going to do is we're just going to bus these. And this is that limiter portion that I was telling you about. I'm sure you have buses set up for that purpose. So we go here to group 1, which is actually our bus for, it's one of our preset buses that I use. And we're just going to be like kick group. And this is important because oftentimes kicks have just a really unruly transient on them that when you go to limit your track, the first thing your limiter starts to react to is your kick. You're probably familiar with this. Like, you're like watching that limiter and you're like, the kick's the first thing that hits it. And then when everything finally hits that limiter, the kick is just driving the limiter crazy and you can't control how your limiter responds. So this is more of an advanced thing, but it's so easy to do because you can take any tool that's a limiter and do this. And for this example, I'm using L1. To just shave the top of the transient of this kickoff and see how much I can get away with. Yeah, so we're just going to shave, see how much gain reduction or attenuation we can get. I love that word. We're attenuating the volume of our sound. People are like, what does that mean? I don't know, but it sounds cool. So let's play around with it and see what we have. So my goal when limiting a kick to get rid of the transient is to see how much I can limit it before it really changes the sound. So we'll go back to it and see if we can't change it a little more. So we've basically removed about 2 dB of the sound. It's not a huge change in volume, and it's a sacrifice that you're deliberately making in terms of the kind of character of the sound. And it's a sacrifice you're making so that when you go to limit your track, your kick isn't just driving everything crazy. Because right now, the average volume of our kick, the volume of the kick sounds the same. Yet we've reduced the overall peak of it, so it won't just go into our limiter and just wreak havoc. Really good technique to follow. There's other limiters that are more transparent for clipping. This one's just really easy to see, so I use this one. My actual kick maker that I use is called PSP Vintage Warmer. This is for me, this is what I finish my kicks with. It's always the second. It's one of the last things I put on the kick. It just gives it more body. I don't know. I picked this up when I first started, and it just sounds amazing on kicks. I don't use it all the time, but if I feel like my kick needs a little something more, I put this on, and it's great. So we're gonna fool around with it. And PSP Vintage Warmer is a limiter, but it's a little bit different than what we used for L1. In that PSP Vintage Warmer is, well, the way I think of it is what is called a soft limiter, which means that when it goes to limit, it's a lot more transparent when it cuts off parts of the sound, or to limit the volume of the sound. It's a lot more transparent, and the way that it hides the limiting that it's doing is it creates more distortion in your sound. But the distortion that you get is more harmonic. It's adding more harmonics, and they sound really pleasing to the ear. So you don't realize that, in exchange for more volume, you're getting a little more color, but the color's so pleasing, you're like, wow, that's a really good trade here. So let's play with it. And if you're just learning PSP Vintage Warmer, your drive is essentially your limiting. Your knee is essentially over here at 0. You have what would be considered a hard knee, or like 1,000-to-1 ratio. And then as you move the knee to 100, kind of counterintuitive, it makes the knee a lot softer so that you get that nice little pre-bend, which means that as you increase the limiting over here, it actually takes place sooner. In any compressor, when you increase the knee of it, your compression or limiting is going to start sooner. That's the way knees work. And then we'll play around with this and see if we can't make our sound better. So what the knee is really good for, I've already got some limiting happening here. You can see the pins moving. It's about 2 dB of reduction. What the knee does is, when I want to kind of give a little more of the tail back to my kick and give it kind of more liveliness, I just fiddle with a knee. The more it goes up, the more it starts to make the kick last longer, increases that tail end that we deliberately reduced here. So we're going to play with it a little more, and then we'll see what we get. So all the way at the top, up here at 100, you get a more punchy kick, and then towards the bottom, you get a more snappy kick. And we will just, I think I like it right here, and then we'll just listen to it and make sure. We're going to check our volume again, because PSP Vintage Warmer does add volume. So now that we're volume matching, when I bypass and enable this, you'll notice that it keeps the volume the same, just adds a little more color. So it's the choice between snappy or more color. Personally, right now, I don't know what track I'm putting this in, so I like the snappy more because it's cleaner, easier to work with until you decide what kind of character you want your drums to have in your track. So that's pretty much how I make my kicks. It's not complicated. You don't even need to do all the processing. You can just find a sample, EQ it, and change, the decay of it, and you're good to go. Really the best thing to do when doing any kind of sample layering is to not worry about whether you're doing it right or wrong, but to go for samples. To simplify the process, you want to know that you have a specific job for your first sample and a specific job for your second sample. So with kicks, you have a specific bottom sample, and then you have a specific top sample. And the difference between your bottom and your top is your bottom has sub-frequencies and your top has the sub-frequencies cut out, which is like anywhere from 300 to 1K. So I hope that was helpful for you guys. If you have any questions, you know where to leave them. And check out my channel for other tutorials. And I'll see you guys around.